All right, are we good? Everybody good to rock? Okay, so thank you for being here both in person and online. Tonight's talk is neural pathways, roads less traveled. I'm going to go a little bit different on this one. I am going to do some neurology, but I'm going to show you what drives the changes to actually happen in thought process and actions. So we're going to talk about programming tonight, why we do what we do, how it happens, and how we can actually modify or change our own programming. First off, for anybody who is here in person, because we're having an expansion cycle, all the people here in person actually get 15 tickets towards the prizes that we have. So it's always beneficial if you do show up. For those of you online, you definitely get your credit, but you do not get the tickets. So shucks, but we still have a couple more weeks until we are doing the PAD. Our PAD week is November 11th or December 11th. What's the first day of that week? 8 through 11. So if you know anybody who you want to get help, that's when it's our really good deal when they can come in for that discounted rate. And I'll go over that again. So when we look at neural pathways, what we want to look at is how are we perceiving, how are we working through the world. So let's visualize that we're walking through a field. And in this field, we come up and there's a fork in the road. And the fork is, one road is worn. Like you can see that that's the way people have gone. And it's worn down to the point where there's no grain there. The other one is a little moved down. So if you've ever seen like a field of corn or a field of grain, it's like somebody just walked through it and it's just a very brisk, it's laid down, but it's not laid down like the other one. So the other one is laid down where you can see grooves. You can see that if you laid a marble, it would roll down that path. But if you went to the path on the right, it's only been fired once. It's only had somebody walk down it 1 or 2 times. Why I'm bringing this up is how your brain perceives and works is working in this pattern. When you try to make a new habit or make a new decision or make a new choice, it's like going down that new pathway, breaking that new pathway instead of walking the one that has no resistance. And how this works is neurologically, what happens is the neuron has what's called a sodium potassium pump. And let's see, if I remember correctly, potassium is on the outside and sodium is on the inside. Or it's the other way around. Let's say we don't care about sodium or potassium. Let's just say it's the charge. Let's make it easy. Let's say there's a big charge on the outside, 2 plus, and a 1 negative on the inside. And the goal, when you think or when you move, the charge actually moves. And the gradient, it actually allows electrons to come in and it allows one of them to go out. So, yeah, so the sodium is on the outside and the potassium is on the inside. And what happens is, as you fire this neuron over and over and over again, it actually takes less energy to make it fire again. So it's actually a physiological change. So let's say it takes 96 piconewtons of force to make it fire. That means you have to think hard to make it fire once to make the next nerve fire after it. And as you make it fire, the sodium potassium pumps actually get stronger and they pump quicker. And that means the more you do it, now it can drop down to, let's say, 40 piconewtons. That means it takes less energy to actually make the neuron fire. So when you do something and you repeatedly do it, you're actually changing how easy it is for that nerve to fire. The more that you actually fire a nerve, the easier it is to keep firing over and over and over and over again. These are the habits that we talk about. So why I'm telling you this is because The hard path, or the path that is barely broken in, is a new neural connection that takes lots of energy to fire. The old path that we have walked thousands and thousands of times takes no energy at all. Literally, it can take no energy at all. It can only take, oh, well, this is just what I do. This is just a habit. This is just who I am. And I want you to understand, you are the victim or the victor. So you're either the victim or the victor of your habits. Your habits will literally determine what's going on. And when you understand this, then we can look at the neurology and how it fires. So if you are somebody who is, where do I want to go with this one? Repeatedly doing negative self-talk, and you've done that your whole life, then what will happen is your perception of reality will always be negative, and you will find the negative. If you are somebody who has done positive self-talk all your life, or changing yourself towards that, then you will find the positive and go towards the positive, and that's how you will perceive reality. So this isn't woo-woo. This is literally the neurology of how you experience reality. So the more you fire neurons together, the more they actually wire together. What does that mean in simplistic terms? It means it takes less energy to make it fire. So if you are, the first time you go to the gym and you've never gone to the gym, it is a ton of energy for you to figure this out. Well, I got to figure out how to get my clothes. What clothes am I going to wear? You got to think about that. Okay, so we're figuring out the clothes. We got to get a t-shirt and we got to get shorts. Then I got to figure out, how am I going to drive to the gym? Is it going to be this way or that way? How do I check in? Where's my locker? What exercise am I going to do? What is this machine? Why is this guy looking at me weird? Why is that person making those noises? What is that person doing over there? And you're just, it's novel, so it's new, and it's a whole new experience, but you're trying to do something like going to the gym to change your life. And then maybe you do shoulders that day, or biceps, or maybe you just do upper body exercise that day. And then you go home, you go, okay, I can do it. But you've actually fired in your neurology that going to the gym consists of these tasks. So the next time you don't have to think about what you need, you just grab the stuff and throw it in the bag. And then the next time it's even easier, and next time it's even easier and easier and easier and easier. And then you get to the point where you can be talking on the phone, grabbing stuff and putting it in, and not even thinking about what you need to do. Because you fired that pathway over and over, and those steps over and over and over again. So that action is the big part. So that's why change is hard if you don't know how to make the change happen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to change the neurology. There are specific things that if you implement, make change easy. If you don't implement them, it makes it really hard because it takes a lot of energy to think through the process every time. But if you implement the change that I'm going to talk about and how to make the neurology fire quicker, it'll be easy. So basically, I want you to understand you are your habits. So are your habits growing you, or are your habits detrimental to you? This is the big one I want you to understand. Did you choose your habits? Most people aren't aware that most of our habits are actually trained to us in the first 7 to 10 years of our life. We see what everybody else does. We learn that, and that becomes who we are. Well, is that a positive thing or a negative thing? And it's literally, is it positive or negative to you, and how you're going to grow and how it affects you? If you see chronic abuse, then you think that's normal. If you see chronic uplifting and joy and helping, you think that's normal. And these are just habits that are ingrained into us. So the other thing I want you to be aware of is that stress can become a habit. You can become easily triggered and repeatedly go into what's called a limbic spin or a limbic spiral, and that habit can drive how you experience reality. So we'll go into that right now. With that limbic or emotional trigger, first off, there's going to be a triggering event that's going to start the whole system. That triggering event can be an injury. That injury can be physical or emotional. That triggering event could be inflammation. That means you could be somewhere and then all of a sudden all this pollen is released, and that can be a triggering event. That triggering event can be poor sleep, could be illness, could be viral, bacterial infection, could be you're flying lots of times a year and you're getting a lot of radiation coming through the airplane. So there's a triggering event. Then your limbic system is going to get fired. So understand, when we deal with the limbic or the emotional center in the brain, it is not rational. Your rational brain is your frontal lobe. Your limbic is midbrain and brainstem and sometimes, but mainly midbrain. And that brainstem and midbrain is nothing to do with rationality. It's fight, flight, freeze. It's I'm going to react. So we have the trigger, we have the alarm, and then what do? You sensitize yourself to the environment. So when you activate the limbic or the emotional part of your brain, you actually become more aware of everything. You're more aware of the smells. You're more aware of pain. You're more aware of every single stimuli you can experience. When you are in a heightened state of emotion because of a trigger, your muscles will tighter. You're aware of every stimuli, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, touch, pain. Everything is more sensitive, pressure, barometer. But the big thing that you also need to be aware of is when you're in that emotional state, you also decrease the vagal tone. That means the vagus nerve decreases because you're going into sympathetic or fight or flight. So you upregulate stress and downregulate relaxation. You're heightened to everything. You're hypersensitive. So let's say we had an infection, and now we're hypersensitive to the environment that is around us. And then we get in a fight with our spouse. Well, now that fight is the end of the world because it's the worst thing ever, because now I'm oversensitive to every single experience that's ever happened to me. That triggering experience will now trigger other aspects, because now when you experience that, when you're in your limbic, you catastrophize the event. It becomes the worst thing ever. You have other things that can become fear of movement. I can't move because I'm too scared. Fear of fatigue or failure. Fear that you are too fragile. And you can become hyper-focused. And this is all happening because you're stuck in that emotional limbic response. Then you're going to drive into this. So this will all happen very quickly. This is in a second. It's not like step after step after step. This is, I got an infection. Now I'm oversensitive. Now I become overreactive to the environment. And then you become protective and you upregulate the sympathetic or the stress patterns. So this is going to make you become over-responsive. You are going to become tight muscles, shallow breathing, fight or flight response. But the key you need to understand here is when you go into sympathetic fight or flight, you turn on inflammation. The fight or flight response will literally turn on inflammation, because the fight or flight response is for bacterial viral infections. You need inflammation. The fight or flight response is for emotional. You don't need inflammation for that, but it turns it on. Trauma, falls, trips, falls or trips, you need inflammation to get rid of that damaged tissue. But the same emotional trigger will trigger the same inflammatory response as if you have a bacterial or viral infection, or if you have a damaged ankle because you rule it or something like that. That will upregulate that inflammatory response. then you will also see a change in how your body experiences reality, in that you will decrease blood flow now to your frontal lobe, as well as more to the brainstem. You are not rational. This will increase tension. And what's going to happen here is, remember how I said you have this increased sensation? You can smell, hear, feel everything at a higher level. Now you can be triggered, and this is how PTSD works, by a song. Because now you will feel that same emotion that song was happening at the same time. Now you can be triggered by a smell, because that smell happened at the same time, and that emotion of what was happening then will be reactivated, and that pathway will keep reactivating. Now you can be triggered by somebody's hair color, by somebody's speech. So say you were somebody and somebody really mean to you was speaking a different language. Whenever you hear that language, you get triggered. Whenever you see a clothing color that happened during that event, you get triggered. And you can actually get into a limbic pain cycle where you physically get triggered by smelling, hearing, seeing, tasting certain things. And it will cause that firing to keep happening. Like we were saying, that easy pathway that happens, the more you fire this dysfunctional pathway that will lead to pain or abnormal perception, the easier it is to fire. So think about, how easy is it to learn a new movement? Have any of us ever picked up a new sport or a new activity? So let's say we learn how to play video games with a cousin or a nephew or something, and they've been doing it for hundreds of hours. So they say, oh, it's very easy, and you don't know how to do it. It's very awkward. That's new neurology. For that child, though, they've done it hundreds of hours, so it's really, really easy. Think of that pathway that leads to you breaking down, you being sick, as a pathway you can train or untrain. So the more you fire it, the easier it becomes fired. The more you do this, the more problems can actually show up. Do you have any questions so far? So then we can actually look at, what does this look like in the actual brain? I'm going to talk very specifically about the frontal lobe today. So when we're looking at the brain, and we're looking at the frontal lobe specifically, so we're looking at this frontal lobe, there are different brain waves. We have beta, alpha, theta. I'm just going to talk about these three today. Beta, 13 to 38, alpha, 8 to 12, theta, 3.5 to 8. And what I want you to look at is understand these frequencies are turned on with different states. When you are in a relaxed state, you produce more theta and alpha. When you are in a stress state, you will produce more beta and alpha. Alpha was the first brainwave found because it's found in lots of states. But what you need to understand is, in the frontal lobe, you're supposed to have, if we look at this in terms of percentages, you're supposed to have a small percent of beta, a higher percent of alpha, and an even higher percent of theta. The more you have of beta and alpha, the more stressed you are. The more theta they have, the more relaxed you are. So what do these brainwaves look like? Theta is intuitive, calm. It's actually when you get into emotional healing. Alpha is conscious relaxation, and beta is stress, if we're going to do it really simple. Guess what happens when you become triggered? When you're in a fight or flight response, you produce less of this and more of this. So this is what healthy looks like. Now, let's do purple. This is what stress looks like. The exact opposite. You will produce more beta, more theta, and less, or more beta, more alpha, and less theta. This will actually show up in the EEG. This will show up as a specific pattern that we see. When we see this pattern, it is the fibromyalgia, chronic pain, sleep pattern. If you have dealt with major stressors in your life, this pattern where you have less theta, more alpha, and more beta will show up. At first, it shows up as what's called alpha ADD, which means you produce more alpha than theta. But you're supposed to produce more theta than alpha. This alpha ADD will show up as talkativeness, distraction, and so forth. This is a pathway that's been triggered, though, and trained. Then, if you are stressed out enough, it'll drop down where now you get chronic pain, fatigue, and sleep issues. The ratio that switches it is when your theta over alpha ratio is less than 0.8. So what that means in simplistic terms is you have less theta than alpha, and you're supposed to have more. Does that make sense? So you're stressed out, and basically your brain speeds up. You're trying to control the environment, trying to control everything around you. If you stay in this state long enough, what happens is you're literally wired to be aware of everything. And if you're like this, the only way you can calm yourself down is actually through talking. And so talking will actually make you feel calm. So if you've met that person that when they get stressed, they have to talk incessantly, they're literally just telling you they have alpha ADD. And when you meet that person, if they do this for too long, then they can be prone to fibromyalgia, chronic pain issues, fatigue issues. And that's the body literally shutting down. Why am I bringing this up? Is because this person in that frontal lobe can be triggered by a smell to change their brain and feel chronic pain. So literally the smell of the abuser from 20 years ago, the cologne that person wore, could literally trigger them to go into chronic pain because their brain will actually change the frequencies. The more we're triggered in this way, the easier it fires. And this is how your fibromyalgia patients can get into chronic pain issues, is that they have thought processes that literally can keep firing, leading to their brainwaves changing, leading to them being in more pain. They can also have thought processes that keeps firing that pathway over and over again that can now lead to them being in fatigue or not having good sleep. So what I'm showing you here is that literally the way you think, if you're predisposed into, say, this pattern, can lead to chronic pain, can lead to chronic fatigue. So what we want to do is decide, are we going to be the victim or the victor of our habits? Now, how do we control them? There are very important things that we want to use to control it. The first one everybody knows. If you want to change your habit, what do? You repeat it. You do it over and over and over again, but you want to repeat it the right way. So if you want to repeat it, you have to figure out what to change that habit into and make that pathway fire differently. So we can repeat it. We also, though, want to repeat it with a specific emotion. The emotion will trigger the habit to happen quicker. The emotion will trigger the neurology to happen quicker. I'll give you an example of this. Where were you, and you don't have to say this right now because I'm running out of time, but you'll know on 9/11 when you found out one of the towers was hit. You know exactly where you were because of the intensity of that event. That was an emotionally triggering event, and you hardwired your neurology that second. You knew exactly where you were. I know exactly where I was. Everybody does. And that's because of the emotions that are tied to it. So if you want to remember something, you tie an emotion to it. The more emotionally charged it is, the easier it will be to remember. And there is no good or bad with this. You can tie the emotion to whatever it's going to be. Usually, positive emotions make it easier, though. But you can remember it if it's a negative emotion as well. But the more charged the emotion is, the quicker it is for you to remember it. The next thing is also novelty. Is this something new? Is it a new way of thinking, a new experience? So think about the last vacation you went on and that was all new, and you can remember all about it. So the newer it is, the more the changes, the better it is. So if you want to have a new experience in going to work each day, drive a different direction and it'll be completely novel to you, and it'll be a new day and it'll be very interesting. So we have repetition, we have emotional charge, and we have novelty. And then the last thing is attention. So if we're going to do this, we want to repeat it, but we want to focus on it. If you put these 4 aspects into play, you can make that pathway fire a lot quicker. So what can be novelty? When we're memorizing it, we remember it with a pirate voice, or we remember it with a happy voice, or we remember it with music, or we remember, that's a novel way of remembering things. Or remember it to dance, or whatever it is going to be. And when we repeat it, we can repeat it like over and over again, but we can also do it with an emotion tied to it. And I want you to understand that if you smile, you literally change your brain. You make it think you're happy. If you frown and change your posture, you will make your body believe. Your posture can dictate your emotions because it will change the chemistry of your body. So if we want to be in a certain memory state or a certain feeling state, we can change it by our posture. We can change it by our physiology. So to repeat it, do it over and over again so it becomes automatic. Have an emotion tied to it. Make it novel or a new experience, a new way of doing it, new way of seeing it. Maybe we do it by reading it with red glasses on. Or we do it by laying sideways. That's novel to our brain, so we'll experience it differently. And then we have a lot of attention to it. When we do these things, it will drive the loop to change. And then the more you do it, the easier that feeling or emotion will actually change. So if you keep getting triggered every time you see shoes, like say every time you see somebody who has red pants, then what you do is buy a pair of red pants and then decide that that red pant means that your dog gives you a kiss or something. And you can literally reprogram what the belief of those pants are by changing it, because the dog giving you a kiss every time you see the pants is a new novel experience and the emotion is positive, and you can literally rewire the meaning of stuff. So these pathways I'm basically showing you are a reflection of whatever you want to be. So my question for you is do you want to choose your pathway, or do you want old ones that you don't like? Choose your life. And it's up to you. So if you want to change them, use the steps I was talking about. Think about it, be able to determine what the outcome is going to be, and then make your trigger now something that can be positive for you. Change it, repeat it, and it can actually mean something else. And as you do that, that new pathway will then drive your life instead of the old one. And the new pathway is what you program it to be. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not an easy step, but the more you do it, the more you use the repetition, the intensity of the emotions, the novelty and the attention to it, the easier it will become. And then your new habit will be what you want it to be. So if you want your habit to be that every time you see stress come up, you get excited, you can change that. Or do you want your habit to be every time you see stress, you get anxious? It can be whatever you want it to be. And that's the cool thing with the neurology, is you can literally reprogram yourself and you can be in control. So you don't have to be the victim of your past experiences. You can actually change them. So if you have a friend or family member who keeps reliving past traumas over and over and over again, this is how you fix it. And if you're like, well, that's too hard, there are other ways for us to do this. We can literally adjust you, which will break the pathway, laser you to give you more energy, and then reprogram it like I was showing you here with the frequencies, so you can literally work through it. This is why we'll see cathartic releases with patients where they will actually relive trauma but move through it and not have it drive their life anymore. Because we'll actually make them move through that pathway, and it won't be able to drive their life, that emotion. It'll make them be able to drive their life the way they want to. Do we have any questions? Nope. So I want to thank you guys for being here. If you have any friends or family members who would like to learn how to repattern their brains or get better from something, we have that patient appreciation week coming up, December 11 to 12, correct? Or 11 to 8 to 11, correct, ladies? During that week, if anybody wants to come in and they're referred by you online or you in here in person, it's $20 for that full exam. It's the best deal we have, the last one we're going to do of the year. So I want to thank you. Think of a friend or family member, and please make a change for them.